Begin. Jedediah Jed Stone lived a quiet life by the big, winding river. His farm wasn't the biggest, but his barn was the warmest, always smelling sweet like fresh-cut hay and sun-baked wood. Jed himself was a kind man, with eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, which was often. Folks for miles around knew Jed not just for his good grain, but for his stories. Oh, he had a tale for every occasion, spun from thin air or a tiny spark of truth, then polished until it shone like a river stone. The river was Jed's constant friend. It hummed a low song in the daytime and whispered secrets at night. He knew its moods, from the gentle lapping of summer to the angry roar of spring floods. His small, sturdy house stood on a little rise, safe from the water's reach, and his barn, even bigger and sturdier, stood right beside it. Inside, the hay bales were stacked high, making cozy nooks and crannies, perfect for hiding from the world or from bad weather. Jed spent his days tending his fields, his hands rough from work, but his heart soft. He wasn't a man who looked for trouble, but he wasn't one to shy away from it either, especially if someone needed help. He believed in doing what was right, even when it was hard. And sometimes by the big river, things got very hard indeed. The air around his farm often carried the scent of possibility and the quiet hum of a life lived simply, yet ready for anything. His lantern, hanging by the barn door, was often lit late into the night, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to tell stories of their own. And begin. One night, the river wasn't singing its gentle song. Instead, it roared, and the sky opened up, pouring rain like a broken dam. Thunder cracked, making the old barn timbers groan, and lightning lit the world in stark, white flashes. Jed was inside, mending a harness by the warm glow of his fireplace, when a frantic pounding rattled his front door. It wasn't the usual knock of a neighbor, but something desperate and urgent. He pulled the door open, and the wind tried to rip it from his hand. Standing on his porch, drenched and trembling, was a family. A man, his face etched with fear, clutched a small girl to his chest. Beside him, a woman held a bundled baby, her eyes wide and pleading. Their clothes were torn, their faces streaked with mud and tears. "Please, sir," the man gasped, his voice barely audible above the storm. "They're after us. We need help." Jed's gaze swept over them, taking in the raw fear that clung to them like the rain. He saw not just a family, but a hunted one. The words hung heavy in the air. Hunted. It was a word that brought a chill colder than the night air. He didn't ask who they were or why this family was running. The desperate plea in their eyes was enough. His heart, though soft, was also strong. He knew, in that instant, that turning them away was not an option. "Come in quick now," Jed urged, pulling them inside, away from the lashing rain and the cruel wind. The family stumbled into his warm, dry home, shivering uncontrollably. The small girl whimpered, and the baby let out a tiny cry. Jed looked at their faces, young and old, all marked by terror, and a quiet resolve settled over him. He knew what he had to do. And begin. Jed quickly ushered the shivering family towards the back of his small house, where a hidden door led directly into the barn. The storm outside raged, a perfect cover for their secret arrival. "No time for questions now," Jed murmured, his voice calm but firm. "You'll be safe in the hayloft. Nobody ever looks there." The family, still wide-eyed with fear, followed him without a word. The barn was a haven from the biting wind and pelting rain. The air inside was thick with the comforting smell of dry hay and the earthy scent of grain. Jed led them to a sturdy wooden ladder that disappeared into the shadowy loft above. "Up you go," he encouraged gently, helping the mother first, then the small girl, who clutched a worn rag doll. The father, with the baby still bundled close, followed quickly. Jed climbed after them, his lantern casting dancing shadows on the dusty beams. The hayloft was a world unto itself. Bales of sweet-smelling hay were stacked almost to the roof, forming soft, warm walls. Jed quickly pushed some bales aside, creating a cozy, hidden nook deep within the hay. "Here," he said, patting the fresh hay. "You can rest here. It's warm, and no one will find you. He spread an old blanket he'd grabbed from the house over a particularly soft pile of hay. The family sank into the soft bed, exhaustion finally taking over. The little girl, nestled between her parents, stopped whimpering, her eyes already drooping. The baby, lulled by the quiet rustle of the hay and the distant rumble of thunder, began to drift off to sleep. Jed gave him a small jug of water and some dried fruit. "Stay hidden," he whispered. "I'll keep watch." With a final, reassuring nod, he climbed back down, leaving them safe within their golden, hay-scented sanctuary. And begin. With the family safely hidden, Jed's mind began to work, quick and sharp like a fox. He knew the trackers wouldn't be far behind. He couldn't just wait for them to arrive. He needed a plan, something to throw them off the scent to buy time. His gaze fell upon the lantern hanging by the barn door, its light now a beacon in the still stormy night. A mischievous glint appeared in his eye. He grabbed the lantern and stepped out into the pouring rain. The river, though still swollen, was starting to calm its roar. Jed walked to the edge of his property, near the winding path that led to the main road. He held the lantern high, then lowered it quickly, a short flash, then another. He paused, as if straining to see something in the darkness across the river. He repeated the flashes, a slow, deliberate pattern. He was signaling, but to no one. He was pretending to see something that would draw attention away from his farm. He moved along the riverbank, occasionally flashing the light towards the distant woods, then quickly pulling it back, as if he'd caught a fleeting glimpse of movement. He even let out a soft, questioning call, as if trying to get a response from an unseen figure. He was painting a picture of pursuit, but one that led far away from his barn. He was a master storyteller, and this was his most important tale yet, told with light and shadow. He knew that anyone watching from afar, anyone looking for signs of movement or escape, would see his light. They would see his supposed discovery, and their eyes would follow his lantern's dance. He was baiting a trap, not with food but with false hope. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead, but he didn't notice. His mind was already 3 steps ahead, planning the next part of his clever ruse. And begin. The storm had passed by dawn, leaving the world sparkling and fresh, but the calm was deceiving. Just as Jed was finishing his breakfast, a cloud of dust rose on the road leading to his farm. Soon, 3 figures on horseback emerged from the mist, hard-faced men with cold eyes. Trackers. They were the kind of men who didn't smile, and their horses looked as tired and grim as they did. They reined in their horses sharply in front of Jed's house. The lead tracker, a burly man with a scar running down his cheek, dismounted first. He looked Jed up and down, his gaze piercing, as if trying to see straight into Jed's thoughts. "Morning, farmer," the scarred man grunted, his voice rough like gravel. "See anyone pass through here last night? A family, maybe? Man, woman, 2 small children." Jed wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, acting as if he was just a simple farmer bothered by unexpected visitors. He squinted at them, feigning a bit of confusion. "A family, you say? Last night was quite a storm, wasn't it? River was up, wind howling like a banshee." Another tracker, younger and leaner, dismounted and walked around the yard, his eyes darting, searching for tracks or any sign of recent passage. "Don't play dumb, old man," he snapped. "We know they're around here somewhere. We saw your lantern flashing by the river last night. What were you looking at?" Jed chuckled, a low, easy sound. "Oh, that. Just a bit of scare. Thought I saw some river rats messing with my traps down by the old oak. You know how it is, a farmer's got to protect his livelihood." He gestured vaguely towards the river. "Too dark and rainy to make out much, but I swear I saw something dart into the woods on the far bank." He watched their faces carefully, seeing the flicker of interest in their eyes. And begin. The lead tracker, the one with the scar, narrowed his eyes, chewing on his lip. "Something darted, you say? On the far bank." Jed nodded slowly, stroking his chin. "A quick flash. Could have been a deer, could have been a bear." But then again, he paused, letting his words hang in the air. With that storm and the river so high, a body might try to cross. Might even make it across if they were desperate enough. and if they knew the river's tricks. He pointed downriver, towards a bend where the current was known to be swiftest. There's a spot down there, near the old willow, where the river's a bit narrower, but the undertow's fierce. Only a fool or someone truly desperate would try in that weather. The younger tracker, who had been circling the house, came back, shaking his head. No fresh tracks around the barn, boss. Ground's too muddy from the rain, but nothing obvious. Jed smiled inwardly. His lantern ruse, combined with the storm's natural cover, had worked. "Well, that's what I told you," he said, feigning a huff. "Just a farmer trying to keep his traps safe. But if you're looking for folks who might have crossed the river, that's the only place they'd have a ghost of a chance. And they'd be soaked to the bone, likely heading for higher ground to dry out." He gestured vaguely towards the distant hills. "There are some old logging trails up there, barely used anymore. Good place to hide." The trackers exchanged glances. Jed's tale, full of folksy wisdom and local knowledge, sounded just real enough. The scarred leader grunted, "All right, old man. Thanks for your time." He swung back onto his horse, followed by the others. With a crack of reins, they turned their horses not towards the main road, but downriver, heading straight for the treacherous bend Jed had described, and then, presumably, towards the distant, empty logging trails. Jed watched them go, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. His story had sent them on a wild goose chase. End. Begin. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples, Jed knew the trackers would likely be returning. His earlier ruse had bought some time, but they wouldn't stay fooled forever. He needed one more grand performance to ensure the family's escape. He lit his lantern again, its warm glow cutting through the deepening twilight. He walked purposefully down to the riverbank, not far from where he'd been signaling the night before. He looked upriver, then down, his eyes scanning the water as if searching for something. Then he held his breath, straining his ears. Suddenly, Jed let out a loud gasp, a sound of surprise and excitement. "There, by the old sycamore!" he exclaimed, his voice carrying across the quiet evening air. He began to wave his lantern wildly, a frantic, excited motion. He pointed across the wide expanse of the river, his arm extended dramatically. "They're crossing. I see 'em. A small boat. They're making for the other side," Jed shouted, his voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and triumph. He leaned forward, squinting into the gloom, as if trying to get a better look at the phantom boat. He flashed his lantern rapidly, a beacon meant to draw attention, not to guide. He even took a few steps into the shallow water, splashing loudly, acting as if he was about to jump in and pursue them himself. His performance was Oscar-worthy. He imagined the trackers, perhaps just returning from their fruitless search downriver, seeing his dramatic display. They would see his frantic signals, hear his shouts, and believe he had finally spotted their quarry. He hoped they would be close enough to hear his shouts, and especially close enough to see his wildly swinging lantern. This was his final, most convincing lie, designed to send them directly into a trap. And begin. Jed's theatrical shouts and frantic lantern waves echoed across the darkening landscape. It wasn't long before he heard the pounding of hooves. The trackers, having returned from their fruitless search up the logging trails, had indeed been close enough to witness Jed's grand performance. They galloped up, their horses snorting, their faces grim. "What is it, old man?" the scarred leader barked, pulling his horse to a halt. Jed pointed a trembling finger across the river, his voice a strained whisper. "There, I saw them. A small boat, just a dark shape against the water. They're making for the far bank, by the old sycamore tree." He gasped for breath, acting as if he'd just run a mile. The trackers squinted into the gloom, trying to make out what Jed claimed to see. The younger tracker pulled out his spyglass, peering intently. "I think I see something, boss. A flicker, just a shadow," he exclaimed, his voice filled with newfound excitement. Jed's dramatic acting had convinced him. "That's them. They're almost across," Jed shouted, splashing further into the water, as if to prove his point. "Fool!" the scarred leader roared. "Why didn't you stop them?" But there was no time for questions. Seeing the supposed escape, the trackers spurred their horses forward, not towards Jed, but downriver, aiming for the spot where Jed had so convincingly pointed. They crashed through the underbrush, their shouts of "after them" fading into the night as they galloped towards the empty riverbank where Jed had staged his phantom crossing. They were completely fooled, rushing off in a desperate hurry to catch what wasn't there. Jed watched them disappear, a triumphant glint in his eye. His cunning ruse had worked perfectly, buying precious time. And begin. The sounds of the trackers crashing through the brush and shouting faded into the distance. Jed didn't wait. He sprinted back to his barn, his heart thrumming with a mixture of relief and urgency. He climbed the ladder to the hayloft, his movements quick and quiet. The family was huddled together, their faces pale in the dim light filtering through the cracks in the barn walls. They had heard the commotion outside, the shouts, and the thundering hooves, and their fear had returned. "Now's our chance," Jed whispered, his voice firm but reassuring. "They're gone, chasing shadows." He gestured for them to follow him. He led them carefully down the ladder and then through a small, rarely used door at the back of the barn, hidden behind a stack of old lumber. This path led directly to a secluded cove on the riverbank, where Jed kept a small, flat-bottomed boat hidden beneath a tarp. It was a simple craft, made for fishing in calm waters, but it was enough. The father's eyes widened when he saw the boat. He understood. This was their real chance. Jed helped the mother and the small girl into the boat first, then gently placed the baby in the father's arms. He handed the father a sturdy oar. "The current's strong, but it'll help you," Jed murmured, his voice low. "Row straight across, towards the big oak on the far bank. Once you're there, follow the old deer trail up into the hills. It's rough, but it'll take you away from here, far from any roads." He gave them a small pouch of dried meat and a skin of water. "Go quickly and don't look back." The family nodded, their eyes filled with a silent gratitude that spoke more than words ever could. The father gripped the oar, his knuckles white. The mother held her children close. They pushed off from the bank, their small boat gliding silently into the dark, flowing river, leaving no trace behind. And begin. Jed stood on the riverbank, hidden in the shadows of the old sycamore, watching. The small boat was just a dark smudge against the darker water, moving steadily away from him. The only sound was the gentle dip of the oar, a soft rhythm against the current. He held his breath, his eyes fixed on the tiny vessel, until it was nothing more than a faint outline, then just a ripple on the moonlit surface. His heart swelled with a quiet triumph. They were free. The dark river, which often seemed to hold so many dangers, was now their path to safety. He imagined the family, huddled together, the fear slowly easing from their shoulders as they moved further and further away from the danger. He pictured the little girl, perhaps already asleep, dreaming of a new, peaceful place. The baby, safe in its mother's arms. The distant shouts of the trackers, still futilely searching the empty riverbank downriver, were now just a faint echo, a harmless noise. They were wasting their time, chasing a ghost that Jed had conjured for them. Every minute they spent flailing in confusion was another minute the family gained, putting more distance between themselves and the hunters. He stayed there for a long time, listening to the river, watching the empty expanse of water. He felt the cool night air on his face, a refreshing contrast to the tension that had gripped him for the past day. Finally, when he was certain the boat had vanished completely from sight, swallowed by the vastness of the night and the river's winding path, Jed turned. A deep sigh of relief escaped him. His part was done. They were gone, carried away by the river's ancient embrace, into a new, uncertain future, but a future nonetheless. And begin. It wasn't long before Jed heard the thunder of hooves again, this time closer and angrier. The trackers had returned, their faces red with frustration and rage. They pulled up in front of his house, dust swirling around their horses' legs. The scarred leader dismounted, his eyes burning with fury. "You old fox," he snarled, pointing a finger at Jed. There was nothing there. No boat, no family, just empty river. Jed blinked, feigning confusion and a little hurt. Empty? Are you sure? You see, permiso. Maybe they were faster than you thought. Or maybe, he paused, scratching his head thoughtfully, maybe they were just a trick of the light, with the moon on the water. It was mighty dark, and I'm not as young as I used to be. He looked genuinely puzzled, shaking his head. River's a tricky thing at night. Plays tricks on your eyes. The younger tracker stomped his foot. He's playing us boss. He sent us on a wild goose chase. Jed held up his hands, palms outward, a picture of innocence. Now, boys. Why would I do a thing like that? I told you what I saw. I even pointed you right to it. If they got away, it's because they're slippery as eels, not because of me. A farmer's got enough on his plate without getting mixed up in other folks' troubles. He gave a small, innocent shrug, as if to say, what can you do? The trackers glared at him, clearly not believing a word, but they had no proof. Jed's farm was quiet, his barn still. There were no fresh tracks leading anywhere but the ones they themselves had made. They had wasted precious hours, and their quarry was long gone. With another frustrated snarl, the leader turned his horse. We'll be back, old man. And next time, we'll be watching you closer. They rode off, their anger a palpable thing, leaving Jed alone with the quiet night. Begin. With the trackers finally gone, their angry curses fading with the sound of their horses, Jed let out a long, slow breath. The tension that had coiled tight in his chest for what felt like days began to unwind. He walked back inside his small, cozy house. The silence was deep, broken only by the crackle of the embers in the fireplace. He looked around, at his simple life, his worn armchair, the smell of wood smoke and dried herbs. It felt different now, richer somehow. He went to the barn, not out of necessity, but from a quiet need. He stood in the middle of the hay-scented space, looking up at the hayloft. The air still held a faint sweetness from where the family had hidden, a ghostly scent of safety and secret kindness. He knew they were far away now, hopefully well on their way to a new, peaceful life. He would never see them again, never know their names, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that they were safe. Jed was just a simple farmer, a man of the earth and the river. He wasn't a soldier or a hero of grand tales, but in his own quiet way, he had done something truly brave. He had faced danger, used his wits, and risked everything for strangers. He hadn't fought with fists or guns, but with stories and shadows, with the cleverness of an ordinary man protecting those in need. The sun would rise again, and Jed would go back to his fields, to his quiet chores, to his familiar rhythm by the wide river. But every time he smelled the sweet hay, or heard the river whisper, he would remember the night a family found refuge in his barn, and the daring trick he played to set them free. And he would know, deep in his kind heart, that he had done good.